I have this whole thing, every single one of our initiatives yesterday and today started at 8:30. This one started at 6 o'clock, so I had to go through and redo the time schedule to make sure I was on time. Okay, what questions do you have or comments? And please, if there's anything, yes?
How do you take into account the culture of the community? We have a strong bias, in my experience in Vermont, against wealth creation, and a strong bias that says growth is not necessarily good. So
Right.
your premise at the beginning of that whole thesis is, in my mind, questionable in this culture.
Well, I think that, and this is not the first culture like that we worked in.
It's not,
And usually that is based on the idea that growth means that the environment is damaged, or that people are being taken advantage of. When people start to understand the concept of the balanced approach, matter of fact, we were talking about this in remind me, Pat, I forget, Wilmington. We were in Wilmington earlier. They up there are beginning to realize that the environment that they value as they look around is no longer as pretty as it used to be, because you know the jobs aren't there, the incomes aren't there, and so what they thought they were trying to preserve is not working too well. And so they're understanding that increased prosperity is something they need to see, but not at the sacrifice of just bulldozing the streams and the beautiful trees. So the idea is you take a look at the value, what people really value in terms of the environment that's here, in terms of the basic culture, and you show them that by concentrating and leveraging on that, you can actually increase prosperity. So most people believe that economic development is all about smokestacks. And it's because they don't understand that there's a new economy. And I will tell you, most legislators, in most state legislatures across this country, do not fundamentally understand how an economy works, because they're inundated by hundreds, if not thousands, of things that people are asking them to do or consider, and they don't have time to turn around, much less read and understand everything that's going on. And most of the people in this country do not fundamentally understand what's going on with the economy, and we see it in schools. If you take a look at what parents tell their children about why there aren't any jobs here, it has nothing to do with what real jobs are. It's about jobs they're thinking about yesterday, not the jobs that are going on today. So this strategy is as much about education as it is about economic development itself, because you can't develop the economy in a balanced approach unless the citizens are with you. Okay, so does that address your question? Starts to. This is a journey that takes a lot of steps. Yes.
Along the same lines as Wayne's question is maybe not so much culture, but we saw a lot of economic growth throughout the country in the last decade, and then we saw a total collapse of some places that were absolutely on fire in terms of economic development and prosperity. So the question is there something I see by your response to Wayne, you're thinking about it a little bit more, but is there a saturation point or a sustainable point where you want to grow an economy too, but not necessarily, really a balance? You said the word balance, which I think is a good thought, but is there a point where we reach a balance where we really don't want to grow, but we don't want to lose, but we want a stability and balance and to move forward, but not necessarily overdo it to the point where it's not sustainable and it all collapses on itself?
Well, first of all, there is balance that you can achieve, but nothing ever stays the same.
No, I realize that, which is why it's a tough job.
Right. So I often say, I just finished saying this in Wilmington, you either fall behind or you move ahead. You never stay the same. If you say I'm going to stay the same, you're falling behind. Now that doesn't mean that everything that is that we call progress is good. But what I do know, there is no such thing as status quo. I'll be 67 in August. I've been around the barn enough times that I know that's a fantasy.
Yeah, well, I realize what you're saying, but what I'm thinking is with constant review and constant updating, you can maintain a level that you roughly want to be at. You're never
Yes.
going to be exactly where you want to be
Right.
at any one time. You're going to fall above and below it, but where do you want to be? And constant review might help you keep there with new technologies,
Right.
new, keeping up. Really.
So, for instance, in the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, the EDA requires that strategy to be reviewed every year and fully renewed and updated every 5 years. So one of the requirements you have to, and that's a good exercise to go through, to be able to do that. Secondly, in the balanced approach, one of the things that often get people in trouble, they think economic development is about ribbon cuttings and projects. So they don't have plans because, let's face it, newspaper reporters, any media outlet, and any elected official loves to be at a ribbon cutting. Okay? You can photograph it, you can post it on the web, people can come to it, but usually that is a bigger event than a company that has 5 new employees. Okay? So what you have to, so under a SeVEDS process, what you're doing is you're building a strategy that's based on a journey that you understand is going to take you 10 or 15 years. And when you get to the next 5-year point, it's going to be another 10 or 15 years beyond that. Because when was this town founded? 1700 something?
1761.
1761. Well, it's been a few years in development. And it's had ups and it's had downs, right? So that's why economic development can't be considered a project or an initiative. It is a journey. That's why we call a vital economy, our process, the vital economy journey. So I hope, so you can achieve balance and you can keep things moving in a positive direction as long as you review it and as long as you understand what you're trying to achieve in terms of quality of place. And the reason you have to keep moving ahead is, think about this. If you just stay the same, what happens to all the people that are being born in your region that need a job?
No,
What's happening today?
Which is that they're leaving.
I agree, but there's a lot of things, which you probably already know this, but there's a lot of things. Economic development is great, but when you attract, bringing a 300-job factory into a town also means expanding the school, expanding.
But see,
services.
economic development is not necessarily about bringing.
No, I know that. But what I'm saying is, I think some people mistake, as you're saying, some people mistake what it's all about with what it really could be.
Our philosophy of vital economy is I'd rather have 10 30-person companies than one 300-person factory. It doesn't mean I don't like 300-person factories. It's that we at Vital Economy, and this may be because we're CEOs, all of the people at Vital Economy are former CEOs. Okay, we run businesses. And what we understand is that we need diversity in our approach. And because nothing's ever going to work all the time. Okay, and how many of you have a 401k plan, or what they now call a 201.5 plan? Okay, okay. How many of you have invested all your money in that plan in a one stock? Okay, we recommend communities look at their economic development plan as an investment portfolio, just the way they would look at their 401k plan. Does that make sense? So, our job is to make this keep it simple, stupid. Okay, give people a way. We just finished exploding and blowing up an economic development entity in one of our client communities because they spent the last 12 years convincing all the leaders that economic development was extremely complex and that it was very hard to explain and that you couldn't possibly understand it unless you were a professional. And therefore, just trust me with your $4 million a year and everything will be fine. Okay, guess what? 12 years later, at $4 million a year, they had fewer jobs than when they started. Okay, so economic development is complex but not complicated. if you spend the time translating it in the simple terms that can be understood by the average person in a community is who is going to be a victim or a winner of the economic strategy. Does that make sense? So therefore, if they're going to be the winners or losers, why don't we let them understand and have an ownership in the strategy? So, does that all make sense so far?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Okay. 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 Now, we're going to go into a regional profile. And when we look at a regional profile, this is not just data. Okay? We have to take into consideration the regional profile of things like Hurricane Irene. We need to take into consideration things like what happens if we have a post-Vermont Yankee reality that we have to deal with. We have to take into consideration people's attitudes and their perceptions. And one of the things I will read in here is that the perception and attitudes about what constitutes appropriate economic development and growth are not universally shared in Vermont, and in particular, southeastern Vermont. Many people have expressed a preference for no economic growth. Okay? So that has to be part of the reality that we're dealing with in developing a strategy. Okay. Let's skip over this next one. Okay. In this slide, what we're going to point out to you is this is the demographic makeup of the U.S. 24% of the U.S. is under 18 years of age. Only 20% of this region is. 10% is in the 18 to 24 year category. You only have 8%. 27% is in the 25 to 44 year old category. You only have 22%. 26% is over 65. You got 34% over 65. Okay? So, I'm sorry. Excuse me. You've got 26%. The U.S. has 26% in the 45 to 64 year old category. You've got 34%. U.S. has 13% over 65. You've got 16%. So what's happening here is your region is aging, and it's aging rapidly. Take a look at this. This is the prime workforce, 20 to 44 year olds. You have a significant negative growth rate. From 1990 to 2010, you're down 14 and 26, almost 27%. That's where the prime, if that age group isn't here, how do the jobs get supplied? Okay, pretty difficult. And look at where the growth rate is in the 45 to 65 and over. Look, a 95% increase in the 45 to 65 year old category. Now they're professionals or they're retirees. And I know pretty sure that many more of them are in the retired category than are in the professional working category based on another set of statistics that we'll show you. So in the 2000 census, Maine and Vermont ranked number 1 and 2 as the oldest states. And Windham County is aging faster than Maine and Vermont. So you are number 1 in the United States in aging population, the number 1 county. Yes. Okay?
It's good to be first.
It's good to be first in something. Okay? Now, what's also happening here is, I'll point out, if you look at total employment up at the top here, 1970s 18,000, 2000 it got to 33,000, and then all of a sudden things stopped. No growth in employment. 33, 33, 33. Also, what is happening is that the wages also were stagnating and going down. 2000, you had a higher average wage in 2000 than you had in 2011. And so between 1995 to 2011, wage and salary employment has been stagnant after increasing during the 20 years from 1970 to 1990. And self-employment has shown steady increases over the last 40 years. So you've got this self-employment, but there's a very interesting picture about self-employment that is showing up. I don't know that I have that slide in here, but as self-employment has increased, the average wage earned by the people self-employed has gone down. Yes?
How does that relate to the national economy in terms of?
Totally opposite. What it means, we believe, is that the self-employment is by people in life, making lifestyle choices. Older people who are moving here, I want to have a bookstore. I always wanted a bookstore. They don't care how much money they make. Okay, it doesn't matter what, you know, I always wanted to have a unique bakery. So you have a lot of, and part of the problem with that is, if you have a bunch of people owning shops that don't have an incentive for growth, okay, and they don't depend on that income, you're not going to have a very vibrant, they're not going to concentrate on the innovations that need to be made to make it effective.
But I mean, real average earnings per job across the nation, I don't think you can say they've actually gone up.
No, they haven't gone up, no, especially, oh no, it's only the top 7%.
Yeah,
Okay, of wage earners.
So relative to.
But relative to the economy, this is specifically in self-employment that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
In here, you have the stagnation that's going on in terms of real average earning for all jobs. This actually, if you plotted the U.S. trend, you'd actually see this line, this green line crossing and the U.S. line going up. It hasn't been going up as much, but it's going up.
Part of the reason for that is the service economy in this part of the county and up into southern Windsor County, because we have dozens of people making their living by servicing second homes and by doing these small entrepreneurial jobs, as opposed to setting up wonderful bakeries. But we have a terrific amount of money being spent in that kind of economy.
So what it also shows, though, is, here's another one for you. In the U.S., as a whole in 2011, more than 60% of the personal income was earned in private wages. Here, only 49%. That means there aren't a lot of private jobs, and whatever jobs there are paying a whole lot. Okay? What you're also seeing here is, look up here, you have the 16.2%, that's in dividend and interest and rent. It's 19%. It sure isn't a person changing beds in a hotel that is getting dividends and interest. So it's showing that you have a higher proportion of retirees with a portfolio. Transfer payments, which can be pensions, it can be any number of things. It's 17.9% in the US, it's 20% in Vermont, it's 23% over here. Okay? So you have a lot of money coming into the region that has nothing to do with basic employment. Okay? Now that's good that that money's here, but what this does for you, and when you're below 60% of personal income coming from non-wage income and in the private sector, that means you have fewer people, the majority of people are not at-risk wage earners, which means when they all get elected to boards, they don't understand the concept of risk. They also don't understand innovation in many cases. So that doesn't mean that people working in the public sector aren't good people and don't make good money and aren't, you know, doing interesting things. But you can't, if you have less than 50% of personal income coming from private wages, how do you get the money for the taxes that are paying the public for the public jobs? Okay, so you've got, and what's really interesting here is all of these statistics reached a point at about 2000 that everything started to turn south. It's almost like Vermont, this region hit a tipping point in 2000. And every one of these statistics that is not positive started to turn negative, really negative. So clearly this has been building for a time, and there's also, I won't spend any time on this, but I'll just summarize it by saying that you have a lot of money being earned here that is being earned by people that live outside the region. So you have people, and one of the things we look at here is in the labor shed. You're in a bigger region. In the labor shed, Brattleboro is the second largest employment center of the whole region. Keene is the largest. But then you've also got employment centers in New Hampshire, and this is what is called the labor shed. And these arrows are showing that you've got people coming from here to work in Brattleboro. But they're taking the money out of Brattleboro and taking it here. It's not staying in Windham County. So you've got money going into Keene, you've got money going up this way, you've got money going across to Bennington. So you have more than half the workforce is literally coming from outside the region. So it also means that you're dependent on a wider area for employment. And there are interesting reasons for that. Now, as we look further along at this says what the average annual wages are. And this is further evidence. Is your name Paul? Larry. This is the average annual wage in 2011 in Windham, Vermont, Maine, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and in the U.S. Do you notice anything? The average wage is at the lowest, it's a little bit less than Maine. It's basically equal with Maine, but it's lower than everything else. So it means that the earning capacity, and we'll show you some of this next slide, makes it even clearer. This is those with no high school diploma, high school graduate, some college or associate degree, bachelor's degree, and graduation or professional degree. Here's Windham. Third one is Cheshire, New Hampshire, where Keene is. Here's where Northampton is in Hampshire, Mass. Okay? In no high school degree, the wage levels are pretty comparable, 21 to 23. In high school graduate, 27 to 31, pretty close. But when we get over here to some college or associate degree, 26,000 to 35,000. 32,000 to 42,000. 42,000 to 55,000. In Keene, if you have a graduate professional degree, you can average about $53,000, but here you can average around 42. Okay? Where are people going to choose to go? With common degrees. Okay? So you need to begin to think about why is this happening? And we're hearing a lot of anecdotal, outside the data, we're hearing a lot of anecdotal evidence from people that tell us that they're experiencing this in a very personal way. And they're actually telling their kid, I know some people here have 2 doctorates in their family, and the wages they're earning are nowhere near what that doctorate degree should be indicating. Okay, and they're telling their children right now, don't stay in Vermont. Okay, that is not a good thing. And you aren't the only county in the country that this is happening to. There are other areas and rural areas that this is happening to. So I won't, but I'll tell you, you're also not being helped by Vermont either. This slide here, this is Vermont's economic performance versus New England and the U.S. This is basically, here's the real GDP rate of growth in 2012, and here is the gross domestic product, the GDP that is created per capita. That is, so you basically take everybody living here, dividing it into the GDP and its growth rate. Here's Vermont. Okay, this is the median point. Okay, Vermont's way down here. So on average, what's happening is you're not earning in Vermont in general a lot of money relative to the number of people that are here. Okay, so you're also, and what's interesting is the living standard, it costs more to live here. Okay, it is not, it costs me less to live in the state of Maryland than it does to live here, which I was shocked when I began to look at the statistics. But part of that also has to do with the fact that you've got well over 50% of all the homes in this region are owned by second homeowners who don't live here. Okay, and they're using Connecticut values and Massachusetts values to determine what a house is worth. Okay, and that's not necessarily true. So let me go So one of the things we've been doing, this slide here shows what all these clusters are areas that are in, this was a study done in 2008 by Harvard Business School for the state of Vermont that shows what the Vermont cluster portfolio looks like. These circles are clusters, publishing and printing and education, and the yellow ones are the ones where Vermont has strengths. Where you see an ace or a spade or a heart, you'll see these symbols over here. These are where there are some strengths to build on in your region. Okay, so you'll see this region happens to be a transportation hub, has distribution services. You have a significant amount of business service, lots of education. There are a lot of analytical instruments being developed here, medical devices here, biopharmaceuticals, communications equipment is being designed, lighting and electrical equipment. There's even some aerospace work being done here, motor-driven engines, metal manufacturing. So there are areas of strength here that can be built upon. But in order to do that, you've got to have an economy that's working. And what we see here is this chart basically shows you the relationship of Windham County to the rest of the United States in terms of relative performance in 2010 against population, employment, average earnings per job, average annual wages that are government related, unemployment rate, percent of sole proprietor employment, percent of personal income from non-earned sources. And what you see here is the reds where Windham County is underperforming the average in the United States in all these categories. You only have 4 places that are green. One is in per capita income, one is in unemployment rate, you have a lower unemployment rate, and you have percent of government jobs, you have lower percentage here than the US, 9.9 versus 14.2. So you are basically in most measures of trends, prosperity, stress, and structure. And this is a measurement that's done by the Bureau of Economic Analysis for every community in the country. You basically are underperforming in all these areas. And that creates a lot of stress on an economy. So, we just talked about all those demographics. We've talked about the economic statistics. And now we're going to go back to the goals that were set by SeVEDS. You see now why they have a goal around improving the wage parity with surrounding labor shed. Okay, why we want to increase the size and quality of the workforce, why we need to increase the number of people that are in the 25 to 44-year-old category. Okay, and then we've got to create an entrepreneurial environment. And in order to measure that, this is where we get into that chart that we had before. What this shows in this column is the baseline. This is where we are today. This is where we want to be in 2010. This is the percent change, and this is the total value of the change, okay? And what we have down here in these regional unique statistics, this is the ratio of net earned income versus total income, okay? Remember that chart that showed less than 50%, okay? That's why that goal is basically saying we want to move to about 65% by 2017 coming from earned income, okay, wage-based income, okay? Increase the median annual income for associates in some college workforce. Get it up from 26,000 to 32,000. That's still not at the high end, but it's getting towards the middle. Increase the median annual income per bachelor's degree in the workforce. Increase the 20 to 44-year-old employment by 20% in 5 years, which means you got to add another 2,100 people in that age category. Increase associate's degrees in some college and technical certificates, and increase the 25 to 44-year-old population by 20% in 5 years. So those are specific metrics that are related to the specific information that the data is pointing us to. So these are not just numbers on a wall, these are actually guiding us towards a specific direction and strategy. And up here, we always measure population, we always measure employable population, and anybody ever hear the labor force participation rate? That's the age between 16 and 64. The number of people in your economy and what percent of them are actually working, okay? And then you've got average wage and total regional wages and then regional GDP. So the impact of this is going to be that we expect the GDP of the region to go from almost 2.4 billion to 2.8 billion, which is $400-some billion increase in GDP. Okay, annually by 2010, $96 million in new regional wages. Now, how many of you are on town boards or are in government or represent the state or whatever? What would $430 million more in the Wyndham County economy and GDP do for state or local government?
We could fix some roads.
You could fix some roads. Yeah, I was bumping along a good bit this week. What else? How does that affect the town besides the roads or the county?
Lower taxes.
Lower taxes? Because you got more to spread it across, more people to spread it across.
Well, yeah. More income and more tax base.
Right, more tax base, right. Okay, so these statistics have something to do with government, not just business. Okay? Who's here in a retail store? Who is any retailing? You have a pantry? Okay. What does $430 million more in the economy do for your Stratton or
Well, we see major dips in revenue in the off seasons,
Yep.
between seasons. So if local people have more money in their pocket, they're going to spend more money locally,
right?
which would level
Yep.
that out.
Okay. So what we want to do is make sure these goals are understood by each business and understood by each citizen and each government. Does that make sense? Okay, so that we can move the region forward. Yes.
Does it also affect the nonprofit? We have tons of nonprofit sector in
Yes.
this region, so there might be then more money to support
Good point.
nonprofits.
Absolutely. It also will affect nonprofits, especially in human services.
There
Won't be as much
need.
demand and much need, okay, on the system. So that's why this is a balanced approach, and that's why we're constantly looking at, goodness gracious, we're almost on time. Okay, so what is this regional profile telling you?
Things are pretty dim and we better do something.
Things are pretty dim and we better do something. Okay, what else?
No place to go but up.
No place, well, hey, you know, I am from Baltimore with the Baltimore Orioles. We knew what last place was like until last year, you know, so it's always nice to be able to look. It's always nice that, you know, it's easy to fall off the throne, you know, it's much nicer to go up. So is there something in this data that you saw tonight that you had not understood before? Or did you know all this stuff already? No, you don't count because you've been looking at this.
But I will say that one of the things that's always been especially troubling to me is the amount of money that comes from transfer payments, which you pointed out pretty significantly. But for somebody that works, I think, pretty hard in the region, it's most troubling because not only is there no risk, there's no investment. So for somebody that gets all of their income from a transfer payment of any type, whether it's a social safety net or retired income, they're not don't have to be. It doesn't mean they're not, but they don't have to be invested in the economy around them,
Right.
which is difficult.
Yep. Anything else? Anybody else learned here?
Well, it tells me that it took a while to get where we are, and it's not going to be overnight to get back to where we want to be.
Correct. And that's why it can't just be, oh, let's do a big project. Okay. And it's not all about buildings. You've got to deal with demography is destiny. And you gotta focus on that, and you gotta create a reason for people to want to be here. Okay, let's take a break.
Can I just add one other thing is that, you know, in some respects, you are preaching to the choir in the sense that the people who are here are interested in this subject for one reason or the other. I think that there's a big leap to get more people thinking that this is something that needs addressing.
I would agree with you, and that is not just in this region. That's why we often, almost all the time, get reasons to set goals for the amount of champions that are behind the initiative. So this cannot be, you know, most economic development strategies are developed by what I call the 12 apostles. And every 5 years, the 12 apostles get together, have a beer or whatever, and they renew it, and nobody else knows what's going on or what's happening. Okay, that can't be the story with this. There has to be intense participation, and people have to own the strategy.
And we cannot depend upon the elected officials to do it. I mean, God knows we've tried that long enough. It requires citizen participation. And I was chair of an economic development project for Governor Cunin and Governor Dean years ago. And we produced wonderful booklets and wonderful books. And they just disappeared over their eyes.
Right.
So it's got, you're absolutely right, need champions, and they need to be people who are really motivated to get something done and are willing to take risks and do so. Stick their necks out.
I'll give you an example. We started about 1.5 years ago in central Illinois, where Peoria is at, the headquarters of Caterpillar. It's a much larger region than this. But that region has had huge problems. And we now have almost 1,500 people actively involved and engaged in that 4-county region. Active engaged, meeting every 2 weeks in different action teams, moving the strategy forward.
It's Caterpillar country.
That's Caterpillar country. Caterpillar is headquartered there. Fortunately, the CEO of Caterpillar is big time behind this. So
one of the things here is that the second home, the amount of second homes kind of disguises the issue.
Right.
You can drive down the side roads here and you'll see big houses and well maintained, et cetera, and you don't see the people who are living in a marginal existence.
Right.
Or they're disguised, and that's really important.
And I think that we also were talking in Wilmington today about the opportunity that those second homeowners present. In a number of resort areas across the country that we, in economies that have resorts, we've actually worked on where there's a lot of second homeowners. Actually, they've already made a choice that they like the area. They bought an asset and they're vacationing there. There's a certain percentage of them that might even be willing to live here full time if given the opportunity. Okay, and if all the amenities were in place to do that. And I'm sure Stratton would like some of their residents to spend a lot more time on the mountain than they do already. Okay, and so one of the things that you try to do is to look at, you've already got an asset here, it's called second homeowners. What's the opportunity in those second homeowners who have already made a choice to be here that we can actually convince potentially either to spend more time here or to spend full time here? Because we create a situation that it's good for their family to be here. The other thing we can do by increasing the economy in the region and increasing the amount of activity, those people that are in lower wage jobs, you'll notice in this goal, we were raising the bottom 10% of the job by $5,000 each. Okay, and that's through workforce development, getting them to be in not just seasonal employment and trying to get them more full season. I'm sure you have more full-time employees at Stratton if you had more seasons of activity that you could count on. I was just stunned over in Wilmington today to hear, how many years ago was it? There were 600 busloads of seniors that were here on a regular basis 10 years ago or something like that, and they're now lucky if they see 6. That is astonishing. We heard some stories, I don't know if this occurred up in this area, but we heard some stories about how those senior citizens were basically chased away because they were the pain in the you-know-what. I don't know about you, but I'm sorry, I'm a baby boomer, and there's 75 million of us, and if you don't want us as customers, you've lost your mind. Because we got the money. Yes, sir, you?
I think you're addressing the region that there are some state policies that don't turn out to be much of an advantage.
Okay.
You speak of the second homeowner asset. I think some second homeowners that are here now are wary because of things that happen on the state level, and they'd have reason to be even more wary of making the place their permanent residence as opposed to second home, because it would be costly too. And I don't know, is there any way we could get you up to Montpelier?
Dave, I've been asked to go before state legislators any number of times and meet with different groups of them.
I think there are probably quite a few people sitting here that could attest to that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
You mentioned the timber industry before.
Yes.
And, Wyndham County is one of the biggest timber producers in the state. What we do is export raw material.
Right.
Most of it goes to Canada. It comes back and we buy it back at Home Depot.
Right.
There is 2 mills left in Brattleboro. There used to be one here that was the biggest employer in town. I'm just wondering if you're looking, or whoever's doing the looking, at a value-added industry.
We just had a meeting today with what's that group?
Working lands.
The working lands people.
Ag and forestry.
And we had, what was the name of the big sawmill? What was it?
Sosasma.
They were there, which I understand is unusual. They don't usually participate in these kind of events, but they were there, the CEO and the head of operations. We also had some of the key leaders in sustainable building products in the area at that meeting as well. So yes, we're always looking at value added, and we've done a lot of work in forest land areas. And we actually, in Port Angeles, in the Olympic Peninsula of Washington State, is a major forestry area. And over 30 years, 7 sawmills closed. In 4 years, we built 2 new ones. Okay, at the 4th stage of value added, as opposed to shipping it out as a log. And so, yeah, we believe very strongly in doing that, and it's one of the areas we're going to be concentrating on and looking at. I happen to believe that this area, because of Vermont's historic role in looking at green building, and there's lots of people doing it, that's a very, very large and growing industry in this country, and there's a real opportunity for a hub for that to be in this area. And and that would be developing product, and developing knowledge services and that kind of stuff, so I agree. Why don't we take a quick break for